Good morning. Good morning. Hey, this is Jim. I'm coming to. Oops. Shoot. This is Jim, and I was just considering how really powerful a person's voice can be, and I wanted to teach my students and myself and those that come behind me a little bit about who I am and how I got here. Um, I am a almost 50 years old. I'm a single mother. My children are grown now, but I raised them virtually alone. Um, and I was shown how to do such an amazing job by my mother. I love her dearly, and I love my family so much. But I found that for me, living away from family has been the best thing for me, because I become dependent on other people instead of becoming independent. And this is all about freedom. This is all about my future life, my future best self, but my current best self. As a almost 50-year-old woman, I have been struggling to lose weight. Because of many health issues. But I have become a person who strives to help others in their life. And I want to just share a little bit about my story. I was born in Virginia during Vietnam era. My father was a conscientious objector, and my mother worked in a nursing home, and my father, for his community service, had to go work in a nursing home as well. And so he worked in a nursing home where he met my mother. They ended up falling in love, I believe, and got married. Soon after, they had me, and I was born in Waynesboro, Virginia, in Stuarts Draft area, which is kind of interesting because there's a highway that runs through it with my last name. But anyway, soon after I was born, about 3 months later, my grandfather, my father's father, drowned in an accident, a boating accident. And we moved back to Indiana. So I've been raised a Hoosier all my life. So even though I was born in one state, I was raised a Hoosier. My sister was born in that state. We grew up together, lived all over the place, in Indiana, northern Indiana, predominantly. And I raised my children there. I ended up going back after I joined the military. And, life was not easy, but it wasn't horrible. It didn't have the stressors. I wasn't, I was, I watched abuse. I wasn't abused, so to speak, but I watched my father abuse my family. He did, spank hard. But what I saw him do to our mother, that's why I could never end up with a man who would put his hands on me. And so there goes the reason why I think I've been single as long as I've been single. I did marry twice, and I've been divorced twice. My first ex-husband and I are really, really good friends. We married right before Desert Storm. He was stationed at Fort Bragg, and he came home on leave on Christmas leave, and I saw him at Oak Tree. And I knew his cousin, and I said something to his cousin, and the next thing you know, we're out to eat, and we're talking all night long, and we're spending time together, and we're engaged in a week. 9 months later, we're married. And 3 days after our marriage, he was called to Green Ramp at Fort Bragg, where he was getting ready to deploy to Iraq, or Saudi Arabia. So, and I was on my way to basic training. So our marriage didn't have much of a shot. When he got back, he was a little messed up. You know, when I got out of training, I was a little messed up, a lot of messed up. We both made decisions. I made horrible ones that affected him, but I felt very much like I needed to release him because of the things I had done. Um, and I don't tell my story very often, but after I joined the service, I ended up in a relationship while I was married, ended up pregnant by this man who was married to somebody else. And I had to tell my husband that I was pregnant and it wasn't his. And that was like the hardest. But I knew that I had to be honest with him and I couldn't lie to him because that's not what you do. You don't live a lie. Now, he could have kept me. He could have chosen to stay with me, but he didn't. And I didn't want to hold on to him because I was head over heels for this guy who never did leave his wife, which I'm grateful for. Um, his wife found out about us and the child. Um, and my daughter, I believe, saved my life from things that I should not have been part of. She was born at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Um, Basically part of Operation Desert Stork, which is the 6 to 12 months after any deployment. They call them Stork, Operation Stork. Because typically when they get back, all these babies are born. And so she was born one of 40 children that day at Fort Bragg. And I have not yet met another child born that day, but she is now 28 years old and living in South Carolina. And anyway, I ended up going to Korea, got engaged. We didn't make it. Yeah, he was something else. And anyway, we're not going to go there. But I've lived a little bit. And then when I left Korea, I ended up going to Arizona and ended up having my son, who his father had just gotten back from Somalia. You know, that movie Black Hawk Down? Yeah, he was there when that happened. Now, he wasn't infantry, but he was signal, and it really did, I think, affect his perspective and his perception on life. He was hell-bent about getting out. I got to say, he's one of the nicest guys, and we're still such good friends. We raised my son, who I ended up getting pregnant and having my son. We raised our son in an environment. He wasn't effectively there, but when he was there. And as my son needed him as he got older, he became the father my son needed, especially as a man. He likes to say he's, doing the grown a man stuff and he needs to grow the F up. And so I'm like, okay. So whenever I have questions, I still communicate with his father, trying to figure out how to help our 25-year-old son become a man without coddling him and babyfying him. And, I want him to be a man. I want him to be independent. So anyway, both of my kids went off to college, had a wonderful time. Well, let me go back a little bit. My son was born in Arizona, and I had re-enlisted for Hawaii. And so when I left for Hawaii with my kids, while I was, getting settled, my children were not in the best situation, and my daughter was abused. I regret that with all of my heart. I wish that I could have avoided that. Um, but when she showed up, I made sure she was in therapy right away. She told me, and mom came, my mother and I both grieved for her innocence and for the fact that she had to suffer this way, which you don't want any child to think about things that they shouldn't have to think about before their time. So, anyway, I made it through that year and I decided I'm going to make a career of the military. That's good. I made a career of it. We'll see. And so I decided, because I'd already gone to Korea, left my my daughter for a year, had gone back to Arizona, had my son, ended up stationed in Hawaii. And then I was like, okay, I know I have to deploy while I'm here. I'll go to Thailand because I'd already dealt with some Asian culture. So I was very, very familiar with Asian culture and understood you know, point your feet at people, you know, bow, be respectful, look people in the eye, you know, and listen carefully to what they're saying. Be respectful, you know, about their religions, their beliefs. As I was over there, the babysitter of my children exposed my children to abuse. And when I got back, well, they were trying to get me back because they knew something was wrong. My daughter had a belt mark across her face, and my son screamed bloody murder whenever this lady showed up to get them. And I get emotional about it because this is supposed to be somebody who takes care of children in a very, like she was supposed to be registered. Anyway, I found out that about the abuse when I got back. I was not told initially. They put me on watch because they knew that I was kind of a bear mom and they knew that I'd gone through a lot with her. And this woman, I don't know why she thought that I wasn't going to hurt her, but my daughter still remembers me when she came over to the house. Long story short, I ended up getting processed out the military because I tore up my care plan. I got rid of my care plan and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. My daughter has gone through hell. She doesn't need to go through hell anymore. And it's not going to be because of me that she ends up in a situation that she doesn't need to be in. And I said, had I been a civilian, my children would have been taken. Because this was the second time in 2 years that there was abuse. This time it was physical. The first time it was different. And that's for, that's for somebody else to tell. But when I got out, I was getting out. I was dating a man who I thought cared about me. I was dating a few men. Let's not joke. I was something else. Hot mess. Hot flipping mess. And I ended up having an interview with a man. It was at that point that I realized that I was better than this. And I'm actually proud of myself for walking away from that destructive relationship, that destructive scenario. And I knew enough about who I was supposed to be that I ended up leaving Hawaii, going back home to Indiana with my mother. And a blizzard hits. I'm like, really? A blizzard? A blizzard hits. And I said, God, I left Hawaii in October, go back to Indiana, and we haven't had a blizzard since 78. And all of a sudden, there's a blizzard. So what I do is this, I promise God, because he told me before I should have gone to Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I said, there are no churches there. Little did I know there were 500 churches, over 500 churches. And there's probably thousands of churches now. But I went to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I ended up finding a place where I got plugged in. Now, in the meantime, I only had my tax refund. I had no VA disability yet. I had no, benefits whatsoever. And I'm living in a town I don't know hardly anybody. A couple of my ex-boyfriends ended up living there. And I thought I was doing really good, But just, you know, um, just know that God is in control of wherever you're going. I was about to be evicted. I was actually taken to small claims court by the property manager. She goes, I never would have took you if you would have just told me what was going on. I was too embarrassed. I was too proud. I had no money. But the day before the court hearing, I got all of my AFDC, all of my food stamps all at once. The day after the court, I got a job interview and I got a job. And it took me about 2 months to get a job. So I was struggling. Didn't have any church family yet. And I was truly, truly struggling. But God made it where I was abased to the point that I needed Him. And long story short, I got my life somewhat back on track, got my education started, and I started having dreams that my father was dying. It reminded me of the Wile E. Coyote stuff, you know, like he fell off a cliff, a car accident, and smashed into something. Like it was quick, really, really quick. And I made my mom find my father, which they've been separated since I was 10. We hadn't heard from him since I was like 20. At this point, I was close to 30, but not quite. I was like 27. No, I was almost 30. She found him. I communicated with him, and he said he was fine. Now, this was December 29th, 2002. I moved back to Indiana. With my mother comes down to help me, and we take my sister's truck, and we drive back to Indiana. And me and my kids, my mom, pack up my stuff, put it in storage, and later I'll go down and get it. And I end up staying in Indiana for almost 15 years, or 17 years, I think. Basically, as long as my kids were in school, I was in Indiana. And my father, God rest his soul, passed away December 5th, 2003. So when God releases you or shows you something, follow it. Don't be hard-headed like me. Please don't be hard-headed. Wisdom is learning from someone else's mistakes. Foolishness is having to do it yourself. But you learn from mistakes, whether they're yours or someone else's. So anyway, I just want to encourage you at this point, do what you need to do, be the best you can be, and it'll all work out. That's day one.